Now, there's no doubt about it that right now, Lucasfilm is specifically dealing with a lot of issues because of what happened by Kathleen Kennedy, not just with the Indy 5 box office failure, but also everything that she has done with the sequel trilogy, the Kenobi series, and let's not forget about the Boba Fett TV show, and how she also played a very large role in Mandalorian Season 3. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into the subject. Now, we know that Kathleen Kennedy, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Leslie Headland, and everybody else that has been associated with Lucasfilm have really contributed to the failure of this company. Now, given that we already know that Bob Iger's cost containment plan is leading to a Lucasfilm purge, as well as a lot of budgeting limitations on any movies and TV shows moving onwards for Star Wars, which, by the way, right now is looking very bleak with everything happening with the writer's strike, the WGA situation, and everything happening with SEG. But there's a larger problem at bay here happening with Kathleen Kennedy and the whole blacklisting situation. Let's get into it. Now, we already know that Kathleen Kennedy is somebody that never likes to take criticism very well. She always tries to acknowledge the fact that they're trying to divert from George Lucas's philosophy of the franchise, trying to water down Star Wars essentially to attracting it toward new customers that may not be familiar with George Lucas's work. That's basically what The Acolyte's going to be all about. This show is going to be all about not really respecting Lucas's art, but using that as a way to gravitate toward new fans coming in. Now, on top of this, with Kathleen Kennedy dealing with many issues related to Lucasfilm and projects like The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, one significant development surrounding the blacklisting of Kathleen Kennedy has much to do with the failure of Indy 5 and its box office as well. However, one big aspect of this story that has developed involved how major studios like Universal, Columbia Pictures, Skydance, Paramount, and many others have now finalized their blacklisting of Kathleen Kennedy and use her as a textbook example of how someone who destroyed 3 franchises in under 10 years. Now, it is described, however, that her husband, Frank Marshall, is now running to her aid and using many of his contacts at many of those studios to try and reverse her exile from Hollywood, her blacklisting, if you will. Frank is said to have held multiple meetings with Universal and Columbia Pictures, just for starters, on reversing this blacklisting of Kathleen Kennedy to give her open avenues in her career after Lucasfilm as a producer, as she holds no intentions of retiring from the film industry, period. This is now forcing Kennedy to expedite her plans on opening her very own film studio called Starlight Productions, which is now moving forward for a 2026 release opening to become a competitor against everything Star Wars, Dune, Star Trek, and other sci-fi franchises out there alike. Now, let me just pause here, because this is the bigger problem at bay here, is the fact that given that everything that has happened for Kathleen Kennedy with the major Hollywood studios blacklisting her, this has now put her into a position where she was essentially provoked to, like I said before, to expedite the plans for her Hollywood studio that's going to become a competitor against Star Wars, which, by the way, Disney owns. And this is creating a lot of tension between many of the board members, those like Bob Iger, and how there's a lot of other board members really questioning why Kathleen Kennedy is allowed to even get away with this. And you know what? I question it too. How in the world could Kathleen Kennedy get away from that? That is a breach of contract in and of itself. She is basically making it openly available to them, and it's no knowledge to the board members, that she is creating a Hollywood studio that's going to essentially borrow ex-Lucasfilm employees and hire them. And the plan, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, is to get Leslie Headland in as the vice president. Now, we know that everything ranging from this is going to be an ever-evolving process. Initially, she wanted to get this studio up and running by 2025. Of course, everything happening with the backlog of Star Wars projects that has now been shifted until 2026. Not a big surprise there. And it makes you wonder, why would she not get fired for initiating such a plan like that when Disney has full knowledge of all of this happening behind closed doors. Now this is where things get even worse, get even more complex for Disney, because this is making them look bad. Because all the Hollywood studios, all the major ones, want nothing to do with Kathleen Kennedy, and they are just laughing at Disney. They see the fact that they don't want to get rid of her, or at least the majority of the board members don't want to get rid of her. Some of them do. That's why it's an ongoing shakeup at Disney, and why there is, of course, a lot of problematic situations arising that we're going to touch on, by the way, next week, so stay tuned about that. There's a lot to discuss. But what's interesting about this is exactly what Kathleen Kennedy is up to. Now, further, something that some members of the Disney board find to be very disturbing, since she is creating a future competitor against a Disney brand such as Star Wars, is that many board members are now creating a bigger stir and drama with other board members over Kennedy's complex contract with Lucasfilm, on why she's even allowed to pre-plan a future competitor against Disney to begin with, while being hired to ruin all things Star Wars. This is something that is causing Kennedy's contract to become a big subject of discussion, as Disney, of course, is looking for a resolution that is creating more problems with her blacklisting from all major Hollywood studios, except Disney, of course. So here's the problem with this too. Bob Iger is a part of the problem at the end of the day, and if you really want to get down to the root of it all, I've been mentioning this endlessly, BlackRock and Vanguard, we're all looking at you, the top shareholders of Disney, are the ones really funding all of the nonsense and the agendas getting thrown in to all these movies and TV shows. So here's the problem that I have with Kathleen Kennedy, is the fact that she has this ego now, where regardless of her getting blacklisted and exiled from Hollywood from practically everybody else except Disney, this has now pretty much given her the momentum that she needs to expedite her plans for this new studio called Starlight Productions. By the way, that's a placeholder name. It's not the official studio name. It's just a code name, Starlight. I'm sure it's going to change within the next year or two to be more of the official thing. Frank Marshall apparently is going to get in on this, similar to how they ran a studio of their own before. But what's interesting about this too is that we have Kathleen Kennedy really just going against Disney while staying hired. And I'm really just mind-boggled about how a breach of contract like that is allowed, and how Kathleen Kennedy is able to stay. And this is making Disney look really bad. The fact that we have a liar of a CEO, we have board members that are very much caught up with BlackRock and Vanguard, and how that too is even all the more involved than the top shareholders. There's a lot of things going on with Disney, and there's more to talk about later today, after the earnings call, by the way, takes place at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check me out on Twitter. I will be covering aspects of that, and we'll be covering it more throughout the week. So we know that Disney's not in a good position. Parks, merchandise, movies, TV shows, stocks, it's not looking good in general. So anyway, guys, drop a comment below, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.
Gun in hand, we are alone again. From night to moon we hear them moans again.